Welcome, everyone. We are super excited to be here with you. I have the wonderful, amazing Robin Nordling from Spirited Rebirth and Herbal Healing here with me tonight. And we have some really exciting things to discuss with you. We are both parents. We both have a set of twins and then a singleton. And we've really gotten to discuss a lot of different parenting attributes and what we enjoy about it, what our struggles are. And, it's something we're really excited to share with you. So Robin, I'm really excited to welcome you tonight. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Kelsey. And with what I feel is the most important topic of all, it affects every human being. We all come from a family. And it's what shapes us. It's what creates our sense of identity and the experiences we've had as children, as we found through our healing, through what we've discovered about ourselves, how that's shaped us, our own upbringing and our desires to parent in a certain way. And through understanding those desires, we get a deeper understanding of what motivated our parents. And even with a look into that, we start to understand why they were motivated. And we accept that, yes, in that situation, we would have been motivated the same way as well. So it creates this sense of awareness in the presence that you can really use your sense of who you are in the world by your relationships in a family. And I believe that's exactly what families are for. So yes, thank you so much, Kelsey, for having me today.
No, it's exciting stuff. We're really breaking the mold with how we're choosing to build our families and what we are choosing to have as family values and strategies. And, I know that you feel this way as well. It's so important that we not repeat the ancestral traumas, that we not repeat the situations and scenarios that have forced us to do so much work and to look at ourselves so deeply. Our children have a chance to negate all that, to really embody who they came here to be allowed the space, the loving and supportive, safe space to figure themselves out. One of my sons right now, he's been acting as every animal in the zoo, right? One day he's a dog, one day he's a cat, one day he's a lion, and it's all fine. He's figuring out what he's not. And to me, it's perfect. And I'm very blessed to be able to understand what's happening, because a lot of parents would look at that and say, oh, that's really embarrassing behavior. My kid is, roaring at the grocery store. People are looking at me. This is something that needs to be fixed. This is a problem that needs to be ironed out. This is not an acceptable behavior. When in reality, they're just learning. They're learning who they are.
And like you said, it's not acceptable in this reality. And who deems it to be acceptable, and what kind of reality says that children should restrict their outward expression of spirit, of what they believe the energy is wanting to express itself as through the human body? Is it bouncing around on all fours, or is it flapping your arms and pretending you're flying in a stiff breeze? Every kid has used their imagination to wonder what it would be like to be a bird, what it would be like to swim like a dolphin, or be a mermaid. These aren't things we repress in them, but given certain circumstances, we tell them it's appropriate here and not there. How does a child differentiate where it's appropriate? And how do we teach our children in those moments that it is or isn't appropriate? And what do we have as tools that have been passed on to us? And when we ask these questions, we see that, oh, maybe we have been regulating our children in the wrong type of way, in the wrong places, because it creates this internal dialogue with self within the child that says, you can't be trusted in this part of yourself because sometimes it's accepted and then sometimes it's not.
Mm.
And a child doesn't understand the subtleties of being in public and having tact,
Yeah.
or speaking to others that you know hold certain sensitivities, and you gauge how you behave and how you act is to not trigger those sensitivities. So how does a child learn to gauge themselves from the external in a healthy manner? And how do we as parents not beat ourselves up for believing our children should be at some marker point,
Mm.
or shouldn't be having or expressing a certain type of behavior because it's unknown to us, or it wasn't present in another one of our children, so it shouldn't in this. These are questions to be asked, and I think we know that the root of a parent that needs to ask these questions is that there's a desire to be a good parent underneath it all.
Mm.
Otherwise, you'd be a very negligent parent. You wouldn't mind if your kid did so and so and, I don't know, didn't have morals or didn't have values. You wouldn't mind. You wouldn't care.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't be invested. If you really cared, you would be very restrictive and authoritative, and you would really try to control them into the best possible outcome, because that's the most loving thing you can do as a parent, is to control the outside circumstances and control their responses or train their responses, so it's always beneficial to them. Because when we see them feel pain, well, we also feel pain. So is that pain that we feel not the basis of the desire to want to be a good parent? And that's okay to admit to, right?
Mm.
Because then we get to the root of why we're trying so hard and maybe not sensing softly enough and hearing what our children are needing from us. And we're telling them what we want from them. And this does form a distrust in a child with a relationship outside of themselves. And that's a very difficult thing to see. And when this mistrust builds to a certain degree, this child will need safety. And is our pain due to our belief that we are not safe on some level? Therefore, our children are even more vulnerable.
Mm.
Therefore, safety is the truth of this fear of pain, because anything that's unsafe or unknown could cause pain. And that's where control comes in. If we can edit the storybook, we can make sure that our children never have to read the scary chapters of their lives. And we believe that that's being a good parent. And that is the main driver for bad parenting.
Mm.
Is a belief that we're doing something good, but we're not fully aware of the consequences of our actions, because they play out over time.
Yeah.
And by looking back without bias into our own lives, into the lives of others, and seeing what shaped us, why we have certain drivers, we start to understand how vulnerable we are at certain ages, where there's a big marker point of this true identity of self came on, the ego. When did the ego step in? And that question is the very same as, when was your first major offense?
Yeah.
Or trauma or injury? Because the ego is the reflection of a self that believes it is not worthy of love. So the truth is, if it's feeling pain or let down or injured, it's outside of that love. So a fractured version of self now has a voice, and we call it ego. And this, as we found, right, Kelsey, no one is immune to. And
No.
as we have said, that the main driver of being a good parent is understanding pain. We've felt pain for a reason, and we're trying to prevent our children from having it. And maybe it's a certain type of pain that we can prevent them from experiencing, but the type that allows them growth, how do we differentiate?
Mm.
And there we have to look back, yes, at our own histories, and look back and say, where did I take great offense? Oh, okay, it was where I felt oppressed. It was when I felt I didn't have an option.
Yeah.
And I understand that about young Robin. I understand he was very willful, as my dad would say. Um,
Might as well.
I had a great imagination. So when someone would say, you can't do that, I would question, well, why not? I can see at least 3 ways I could pull that off. And then just to test if my imagination was applicable to this reality, I did try things, and I came up with scenarios and learned about leverage and things like that, and momentum, and was able to accomplish feats that a little boy shouldn't have been able to do. That. How'd he do that? I liked physics from an early age. So it really became a motivator for me, was that type of parenting, saying there's a confine in what you can create. And I said, oh, wow, okay, if that's true, there must be a reason I can't create outside of it. And I can only know that reason when I attempt to create outside of it. Mm. And that triggered something called belief in self. And when that occurs, there isn't a doubt that can jump in. And the doubt is the ego. And I unfortunately had to have an early understanding of ego due to a very traumatic injury induced by a booster that we would all get at that time of life, 15, and for the MMR, and I was one of the unlucky ones. So I dealt with losing what I called my identity. What I believed I was up until that point was threatened. I couldn't rely upon it. It wasn't dependable. It wasn't safe for me because it wasn't mine. It was all gone. All the ideas of what I was. So that's when I first began asking why and real questions and getting real answers. And they came from an understanding of what I am here, not why the world is the way it is. The world is ever changing, and it suits every individual on their path of growth. And a lot of us are on a path of growth, and the growth right now is a painful one. Like the pain I endured as a teen and puberty was interrupted very difficultly by an autoimmune and reaction. So that experience, created havoc in my ability to feel, because my hormonal system was no longer required when you're just trying to stay alive. And many people have experienced that, will watch, that are watching and will watch, have experienced that a trauma, an injury can greatly affect your endocrine system. And that's your thyroid, the parathyroid, all the glandular system of the body. And what happens when that goes out of balance is we lose the ability to produce feeling hormones, good feeling, dopamine, serotonin, triggered in the gut and communicated to the brain and translated up to there. And when that occurs, a human being can feel good about their worldly accomplishments in the day. A hard day's work actually feels good, and you recover because you have the hormones telling you that it feels good. Therefore, it was safe. So what you consume at night can build tissue and be ready for the next day that's full of hard, safe work that will be good for us in the world. And we build upon that. And when our safety is threatened, when we have one of these instances, and I'll turn it over to you, Kelsey, to speak of the impact. And I know you can relate as to what's driven you to protect your children from the harms in reality, and that understanding it's gained for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly been a learning experience for sure. All three of my children also received boosters. They were 18 months old when they had their injuries, long before a sense of self had really even had a chance to develop. So much as yourself, we were left with kiddos that didn't know they had a compass, never mind where it was pointing as far as their identity. Everything was an assault on their being. We saw it with sensory integration, especially. Their appetites completely changed. They couldn't tolerate food with color or certain textures, certain noises. We couldn't run the vacuum. It was like death to them. It's so many different things. And the experience that I had growing up, that we really delved deep into in my mentorship with you and with Leia, is I became very polarized. I also had a sister that was injured, and I saw that play out with my parents. And my father checked out, and my mom kind of did what society told her was the safe thing, was the avoiding pain thing. And I saw that, the end result of that, and it wasn't a happy, healthy individual. So I went completely the other way, as we all do, seeing, well, this was not safe. This was not a good choice. So I went the other way, and anything that role model had done, I swore not to do. It was a very hard lesson to walk through. Here's these beautiful children, these once happy, babbling, learning to talk, ahead of the curve on every milestone, and it all came to a grinding halt. And we had no direction as to why or how or where to go. It was, turn your children over to us. We will medicate them, and we will put them into a system that will reprogram them for you to make your life easier. And I'm very grateful that our journey took the path that it did, because as I was going through the motions and doing what I was told I had to do, I realized I don't want them reprogrammed. I want children who are able to cope with their outside world, and that's where I come in. I need to learn how to make this more comfortable for them, not to fix them because they're not broken. This is now who they are, and they are perfect the way that they are, just as 15-year-old Robin was perfect in those moments, as awful and horrible and painful as they were. But it's as parents, we're so afraid, that you hit the nail on the head. It's about pain, right? It's about avoiding pain. And the pain for a parent is the pain that their children are experiencing, but it's also the pain of what society is saying about them, the mirrors that society holds up for them, the judgment that society flings at parents. And it's very, very hard to break away from that. I feel like I was tailor designed for my kids, because that's never been, it's always been a struggle for me. I've never been able to fit in, I didn't ever find that right slot, that society wanted me to find. And I'm very grateful, because now I have the tools to let my kids learn who they are, regardless of anything that has been done to them, just as you were able to learn who you are, regardless of what happened.
That's right. And what we've really learned on this journey is that everything has happened for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't have asked those questions at that age.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have become the individual that Robin needed the most in his life. Because as a teen that was so broken, he couldn't find someone that could give him answers, that could help him in his direction. So his direction became inward. And had I had some advice that, yes, that was a good idea, and what you're going to face may scare the pants off you, but don't worry, because it's all aspects of you. And whatever you face down there is for you to learn to love and accept all those broken pieces, no matter what mask they hide behind, no matter what weapons they come at you with. They're versions of self that were left behind, and you're going to come across a lot of them. So if I had that advice, I wouldn't have been as daunting, but at the same time, that experience of not knowing and doing it anyway, it was actually one of my drivers. Was to test to see, where is my definition in the unseen realms? Where are we from? Where is this God? And as we mentioned that, now we come to why I believe parenting is the most amazing thing we can take part in, and has the greatest effect on creation. Because these individuals that are shaped through our guidance and allowed to develop into versions of themselves really look to us until they can look inward into themselves. So we have a big role in their life. We are that tangible father aspect and mother aspect of God in their life, in which they look to please, they look to shine in our eyes. They look to be the best they can be, and we are their mirror for them, until they can look at society and look at the world outside of them as their home. Until they believe in themselves, we are their home. So that's a very important role. And when should that role start, and when should it end, and who should have more say? These are all aspects of balance. We cannot escape that we have two factors contributing, and the two factors contribute to create a potential for the third factor to be realized into this realm, reality, whatever we want to call it. We are inviting in, through this union of dualities, a third force, that contains within it both the mother and the father. And in this alone is the Holy Trinity in every family, in every union experience. It's to be understood that it's spirit within us. And we have these essences within us. Everything on the outside is a derivative of what we are on the inside. So we also have a mind, a masculine. We have our emotions, our feminine. And when those two form a union in between, we have something in between, something that has intelligence. It can make wise decisions, and it can also make compassionate decisions. But it isn't polarized in one or the other. And that's for another talk to get deeper into that and why that exists and how we can overcome those dual natures in self and why it's safe to stay up in the head, and try to control the reality to protect the emotions. And who is the gatekeeper that we find that allows us into the emotional body? And we come across our ego, our internal idea structure of what we think keeps us safe. We come up against those gates and we go, oh, I see. And what we discover is, are we keeping things out, or are we keeping something in?
Mm.
And that's a question for your mind, and when you're ready on your journey to ask. And depending on your answer, you'll either open those gates or you'll leave it alone for a little while and see if you can walk around and get a better eye on things, get a little more comfortable. And that's okay, everyone in their own time. And what I've discovered is that time gets sped up depending on the amount of trauma you've suffered. I took on an awareness that didn't belong to a teen because I didn't feel like a teen.
Yeah.
My worries and difficulties on a daily basis were the same as a 90-year-old on his way out the door, or an AIDS patient with a week or two to live. Those were my worries and concerns. Getting up and down a staircase without losing consciousness and fracturing something, waking up a few hours later, checking for bruises and bumps. And it's not a something that someone goes through until they've had that. They don't have that perception of reality and how important their human body is until they lose it. And we see that in our children and we go, oh, that's not safe, oh my gosh. And so yes, we have to understand safety versus protection.
Yeah.
Because if we believe our role as a parent is to protect them from an external evil environment that's bad and harmful, going to get them at every corner, that's the reality their consciousness will grow up in, and they will be a very fearful individual. And they will believe that when my parent isn't around to protect me, I'm extra vulnerable, so I can't protect myself. So the being won't learn from stressful situation. They'll have a panic attack, essentially. It's arcing out in consciousness. You just can't connect your breath with your thoughts, and you're overwhelming your nervous system, your central nervous system, with your thought pattern of fear. And it's pumping too much cortisol into your body, and you're essentially going into a shock-like state where breathing becomes very difficult. And it's very real. It can just be an induced condition out of fear. And chemical medication can disconnect you from producing those fear like precursors in your body, but then you can't feel at all without another form of drug that stimulates a release of the serotonin or prevents its reuptake. And that's where we get into areas of consciousness that unfortunately I have experience in. And that will come as well later on in our series. We have a lot of ground to cover for you all. And the gnosis and the knowledge that we've gained as parents and as individuals on this path of trying to become the best individual we can be within our marriage and within our relationship with our children, and how we can guide them to be self-sufficient, not just emotionally and mentally, but spiritually, to believe in who they are, to understand who they are is important for its uniqueness, not its ability to conform to the external. And when they feel secure in that part of themselves, they don't consider safety. They understand safety of the human body. We can teach them that, but they don't consider it unsafe to explore, because they're secure in what they are and why they're growing, why they're trying something, and they know that it's not what they are yet, so they're happy to fail at it. So when they fail at it, they'll fall down and laugh, as you've got to witness in your
Hmm.
children when they're having an animal party, and then they all end up laughing, because it is so funny that yes, we're believing we are, but we're not quite there.
Yeah.
And it's funny to play that and explore that. So they have a freedom with their sense of exploration. And that's a major congratulations to you for providing that environment for them. And that, I believe, as a parent, we are really responsible for the environment we provide for them. And this goes into all kinds of things. It's our relationship as parents with each other. How do we discuss our problems and our issues and our frustrations when they arise within us as a parent? Do we have a conversation with our spouse in front of our children? Or is it an argument? Or is it a one-sided beratement for something? What are we teaching our children? Because those are those moments where they're really paying attention to how do they deal with their frustration. We teach them what to say and what's appropriate and how to dress and how to behave and where to go to the bathroom and when to ask for food, when not to. We try to teach them all these things. But how do we provide them that sense of belief in self? That's a really tricky one. And every child is their own unique individual. And we fail to honor that until we understand how unique we are. Right, Kels?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That taking that journey, or even just beginning to sit with yourself as not just as a parent, but just as yourself. I think a lot of us get lost in the identity of being a spouse or a parent, or and they all come with their own sets of beliefs and ideas and rules, and it's very hard to disconnect from all of that and just sit with yourself. And as my husband Bruce and I have been working on ourselves and our relationship and our parenting, we found it is vital. It is vital to be able to have those conversations with each other and with ourselves. Our kids, as all kids are sponges. They may be playing Legos, but they are absorbing every word, every action, every decision. And we saw it with our oldest twin. He carries a lot. He's very emotionally intelligent, as they all are, but he really identifies with his dad, with Bruce. And for a long time, Bruce had a really hard time expressing his emotions, and we noticed. Killian's was having outbursts and throwing toys, and it was just he didn't know what to do, because we weren't modeling for him what to do. I mean, Bruce wasn't being a gorilla and throwing furniture around or anything, but he could tell that, well, daddy's upset, but he's not talking and nothing's changing. I'm 3. What do I do with that? I throw my toys around. And, as Bruce and I have progressed and everything, we've seen a real change in how he, you know, approaches these things. Now I get the mommy, I feel mad. That's in my head. That's excellent. But
Yeah.
it's okay. Let's talk about why you're feeling mad. And sometimes he can, and sometimes he bursts into tears, and we just, we hug for 15, 20 minutes, how long it takes. We need to be able to provide those type of spaces for kids. I certainly didn't have those. Emotions were not really a thing in our house. Angry was okay, but you paint on a brave face, you go about your day, and that's that. And yeah, it might get you through, but at what cost? The cost is high. The cost is self. And I think a lot of us forget or don't realize, yes, they're 3 foot nothing, and we still have to help them in the shower and, match their shoes for them and everything, but they're sentient. They're cognitive, they're sentient, they're feeling, they're aware, and they have egos that are forming right before our eyes. And we have an opportunity to not bypass that gatekeeper, but make friends with that gatekeeper. Share that set of keys so that down the road, it's going to be like a superhighway. They're going to have access to everything. There isn't going to be a toll road in their way. There isn't, for which they have no change. They're going to have access to everything you, myself, Leah, so many of us have worked so hard to regain and are still working towards regaining. What is more godlike than that, to be able to provide that for these kids? It's an incredible honor and responsibility. And I think our society, and we'll talk more about this down the road too, but our society is set up in such a way that radical responsibility as a parent or as an individual isn't a popular idea. And we can see the difference when parents don't take radical responsibility. It's
Yes, your child can be put into a category if you don't take responsibility. They find their way into a group.
Yeah.
It's, where do we belong in our group? And our group is specific to essentially work trades and other forms of employment later on. And we're groomed through these types of groups that are safe to our personality type in school. And very rarely do individuals take it upon themselves to make themselves a part of every group.
Yeah.
In order to experience a version of self in every surrounding. And what if we could provide that opportunity to our children to try this, to try that, to experience all viewpoints, not just pick something and stick to it and work harder than others, and you'll be the best at it when you grow up. So if you hyper specialize and can't provide for yourself on any other level, that's going to be the most successful route for you. And we've seen how, that creates a need to depend on that, because it's the only thing you can rely on. So now you can be ruled by that one thing, and you're owned by those ideas that's the only thing you're good at. I'm a plumber, or I'm a this, I'm a that. Are you really? Or is that just a role you're playing? Well, you should be figuring out why you're here. The day job isn't the important thing. Yes, it makes the world go around, so we all have the opportunity to understand why we're here. And we can ask ourselves, well, why? Let's break it down. Why do we do a work week? Well, because I get a weekend. And the weekend I get to myself. So you're telling me, someone said, if you give me 5 days, I'll give you 2 to yourself. And you thought that was a good deal.
Mm.
So we all fell for it somewhere along the line. And where did we get this idea that 5 days a week was a good idea and only 2 days to ourselves is a good idea?
Mm.
Sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And as I've learned as a homeschooling parent now, well, online and parent guided, so they still have their own teacher and a group of students online that they're interacting with. And I have no shame about that. I think it's amazing. My children are home. I hear what's going on. I contribute when they're having difficulty, and I understand what they are prone to having difficulty at. So, and when things are of a conversation that I'm not ready for my kids to be exposed to, I have the ability to say, okay, guys, let's shut that off for now. Let's work on this. They don't need to participate in certain guilt type ceremonies and be exposed to ideas that are very traumatizing to young minds when they're told that very bad things have happened on large scales and are happening on large scales. And these kids, as you said, are sponges. That anxiety and worry, they bring that home. And it affects who they grow up as. And we've already seen it in individuals because of the policies and the social anxiety that is just rampant and the inability to communicate. So it's going to be easier to communicate through electronic devices. And this is, whoa, look at that happy coincidence. Policies ensure consumerism continues.
Mm.
Interesting. But policies make it impossible for certain individuals to exercise freedoms without conformity. Okay. We all know what kind of world we're living in. So we can agree that fighting it isn't going to change it. Being aware of how it's controlling us and looking to empower ourselves in that way is how we replace it. And yes, I don't believe that someone knows how to parent my children better than I do. Others may have more experience raising children, but that was other personalities and children. I know what made me angry when I was young, and I feel that in my son. And it's amazingly appropriate for his father to hold him and tell him those feelings are allowed. And he doesn't need to be mad at himself for having those feelings. So I can understand where he comes from. And all of our children should be understood and should be held, their emotions, to give permission for them to have them. And then when they have them, they're capable of dealing with them when they're triggered again later on. And this is emotional intelligence. And through this idea of protecting them from bad experience, we deprive them of an emotional intelligence, and we have teenage delinquents, and we have total rejection of all conformity.
Yeah.
Through rebellion.
Well, we're stealing their
Because
voice, really. I mean, we're stealing their voice. And by cutting off that emotional intelligence, often at such an early age, you're absolutely right. That's why we see young adults and teenagers who cannot sit down like we are and have a conversation you see them at family dinner, if there even is one, they're texting. They are incapable of personal conversations and interpersonal. There's no interpersonal skills because we've told them it's not allowed, it's not safe, don't do that. And something that Bruce and I have been really on board with each other about is, we're not going to live forever. We're not designed to live forever, hopefully longer than than not. And you and I have talked about that a little bit, but our kids are not going to have us to protect them forever. And it's not what a disservice we're doing, what a dishonor we're doing if we don't give them the space, give them the tools to empower their voices, to be sure that those emotional intelligences develop and are acute and readily available to them. Because what will happen, that something else that we'll talk about down the road, my kids were labeled autistic, and I was told that a certain methodology was the only way. Well, that methodology involves cue and response training, not unlike you find at Petco for your German Shepherd. Who's going to give them the cues when I'm gone? And what happens when they're in a scenario for which no cue is given? They'll have no response available to them because their emotional intelligence has been stripped away from them. And there's a million different scenarios in which that happens for kids through education, through all sorts of things. It's not just the kids that have a diagnosis.
Exactly. It's a societal issue, our inability to choose our emotional response to a stimulus. That takes observing how you feel in that moment and giving permission for those feelings to exist and understanding why, and then responding. Yes, that can be done in an instant, but it can only be done and achieved in a balanced state where one doesn't fear any of their emotional states. They're willing to see themselves in all of them. That's why it's important to allow our children to express themselves. And yes, when they have bad feelings, they're allowed to express them. We don't say, no, you can't do that. We say, what is bothering you? I can see that you're mad. I'm mad too. I get mad. I want to throw things, but I also don't want to break my nice stuff that I love. And I don't want to hurt the house, and I don't want to make others afraid. So when I'm mad, I don't throw things. All right. Or sometimes I'll have a shower. And as a role model, we can express that when they're having those feelings. And in that moment, they're looking at us and saying, oh, you're mad too. Oh, and it's a beautiful educational opportunity because they are focused. Anger focuses you. Frustration focuses you. I used that to my advantage. I was very angry that my body got taken away from me. I was very angry that I couldn't eat. I was very angry that I needed a toilet near me all day long. I was very angry that I didn't know why this happened to me. And I was very angry that I didn't know how to fix it, and no one could tell me. But they were willing to give me these. Yeah, I don't want our channel to be too affected. So, but they were willing to give certain types of medication, and I knew the painkiller doesn't work on this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been at the doctor. If painkillers helped with that form of nervous system being attacked by your own immune system. So picture high voltage lines getting chewed on and the insulation missing. And every time an electrical signal goes down it, well, it doesn't get to the end. It arcs out somewhere. And it felt like stabbing pains like you wouldn't believe. And that would cause a dopamine response to the pain, in which I would deplete myself of all my nutrient resources in secreting those hormones to combat the pain. And it would leave you with that tunnel vision, and then your blood sugar would drop and you'd black out. And that's when I started to learn about acupressure, to stop signals in your body, much like shunting an artery if something is severed. I learned to hold things and squeeze things very tightly and pressure point the nerves in order to stop the signal from getting to the brainstem. Because once it hit the brainstem is when I had the release, and then I would start to lose my consciousness.
Yeah.
So I found I could block the pain. And this became important because that training in my own body, very, well, it couldn't get more personal, that training. Allowed me to have a relationship with a human body on a level that other human bodies can be in my presence, and I can sense where their difficulties are. I am very psychically aware and in tune to my environment, and especially those that I open my heart to, which are all my clientele, my children, my friends, my family, anyone I come across. Even those that I believe don't hold great moral value, I open my heart to them. Because I too have existed at one point in my existence as a moral deviant, I guess. Someone that does bad stuff on purpose. Because I wouldn't understand why it feels so good to have the drive to create the opposite. Should I not have experienced the guilt of being what I'm avoiding? That's the truth of every good guy out there. Look long and hard into that mirror, everyone. Don't be ashamed. That drive comes from somewhere. The drive to be a good parent is pain. Now we're starting to understand the necessity of dualities, and we'll get way deeper into that, everyone, and why we can open up to very appropriately that dark circle in our solar plexus, that feminine void, that negative energy that wants to hold the light, should the light deem it to be worthy. And everything in the darkness has to be accepted. We have no say in what matters and what doesn't. We have to trust that everything in darkness that comes upon us is meant to be. And there's where faith comes in. And your relationship with God is exposed in that inner journey. Because your relationship with yourself is the closest thing you're ever going to get to that idea of what we call God. And do you want to embody an imbalanced being? A God that believes it's either being rejected and oppressed, or a God that is oppressing and causing the rejection? This is the polar aspect of humanity. And we can see that our impact as humans is apparently greater than God's, because we're destroying the planet at a far greater rate than God can rescue it from us. So how do we save the planet? Well, we understand our role on it. Yeah. So we don't need to save the planet. We just alter our relationship with it. So we don't need to save the human being. We just alter our relationship with it. And that's what young Robin did. He said, if I'm this broken and no one can help me, and obviously it's meant for a reason, I'm not sure why, let's see what I can do. I knew the doctor couldn't help me. He prescribed certain things to me. I had this big list of things, and I knew, no, and I said, that much of that? Are you sure? Like, I know what that does to your kidneys. Are you kidding? And he's like, well, it's your pain or whatever. And I'm like, oh, he doesn't care. So when I walked out of that doctor's office thinking, what an a-hole, this guy doesn't care about me at all. That was the very first time I heard a voice in my head. And it wasn't a bad voice. It felt like an aspect of me that knows better, that that understood what was going on. And I had that feeling when that voice spoke to me, and it said, why should he care, Robin? He's just some guy showing up to his job.
Mm.
Is it his job to figure out why you're broken? Or are you broken for you to figure out? So I walked out of his office knowing, yeah, he's an a-hole, he didn't help me, but this is my accountability.
Yeah.
It's not his job. Instantly, I knew I was not the victim. I was meant to understand how I was to heal from this, because this doctor didn't know how. He made suggestions, and due to insomnia, I did see this doctor again because I couldn't find the answers on my own, and the pain prevented me from sleep. Even when I did get to sleep, it would wake me up in the middle of the night. And the dreams I was having, we'll get into dreams and their significance and why trauma events open you up to dreams that contain trauma, and what part of the radio tunes in to what frequency and when, and the subconscious realm that comes through. So my nighttime became my worst time. It was the least restful time, because I would wake up in sweats, I would wake up in cramps, I would wake up in severe pain. I would be going to the bathroom. I think my average when I was counting was close to 11 times a night.
Oh my goodness.
Just to go pee, just to sit on the toilet, hope something happens. So it's pretty infrequent sleep, and insomnia going on for more than 3 months. Anyone knows you're gonna start only thinking of not being here. And it was at that point that I really understood submission. I knew that I couldn't figure this out on my own. I knew I was broken beyond repair. I knew there was no one going to help me. And I was fighting it. So I did reach out. I did pray for the very first time. Well, no, it wasn't for the very first time. I went to Catholic school. It was the first time I reached out to God on my own terms.
Yeah.
Through my own volition. I didn't know if God or Jesus were really real. I learned a lot about it. But did I see it active in my life? Not necessarily. Did I have eyes to see it? It was in action in every moment. I was to learn, and every moment was beautiful, as I've accepted. So that young boy, young man, at about 17, I would say, reached out to God and said, if you're there, tell me why I am experiencing this, and I'm willing to stick around to figure it out. But if this is what my life is for the rest of my life, and this is my reality, I choose otherwise. So please enlighten me as to what this is to teach me, or how it is to change me in some way. And that night I had a extremely clear vision. It was clearer than any of the traumatic nightmares I was having, because I was experiencing it in real time, observing this man, this older version of myself, teaching 4 and 5-year-olds about philosophy and practical application of imagination through creation, and discussing it amongst their peers and myself as the what is my name? We're called facilitators. We facilitate the experience. We're not teachers, because we're not putting information onto them. We're looking to draw imagination and creation energy through these individuals, because the ideas that they can come up with when they given the freedom to focus on a topic and fully immerse themselves in the possibilities they can come up with, it's going to reinvent housing.
Yeah.
It's going to reinvent how we play. It's going to reinvent how we travel. And don't we travel somewhere to have fun, to do something, to get to point B because something is at point B? So the travel becomes mundane and boring. Well, look at it through a child's eyes. They would probably design it so the travel is the most fun part of all. And then you get the bonus of being at point B. That's how a child would create a universe. So how can we as adults employ that line of thinking when we don't have it accessible within us anymore? Well, that's my job.
Yeah.
And not that I'm necessarily harvesting all their ideas for the greater good of mankind.
No, Dr. Evil, you're not.
Yeah. But we're looking to allow them to create the community to shape to what is best for them.
Yeah.
And us as the mature individual within the community to say, let's give them the permission to start reshaping what we have for us, because what is for us is going to be for them. Yeah. And how do we let them put their footprint into ours? And that's how we should be interacting with our children, with our lineage, with all the humans around us. And with that, we are getting there, because this is a future that I belong in, everyone, that we all belong in, that we've created together. And this worldwide traumatic event has been the driver for our future selves to have accomplished this. We needed a great pain to motivate a great desire to do better, because it was always good enough up until now. And as parents, we know good enough doesn't cut it. Right. My kid's on medication, my kid's pregnant, my kid's doing something bad, my kid, on and on and on. Yeah. And we know it's up to us now. The school can't keep our kid in line. It's not, you don't go to the school and yell at them for your kid misbehaving. Sorry. If you feel the right to do that, you gotta ask yourself, why is your kid at school with emotional imbalances? That's what misbehavior is. You don't get phoned in because your kid wrote the wrong answer down. You're just graded lower and encouraged to study harder. And all discipline comes from emotional resistance to control. Yeah. And I'm not saying that we should teach our kids to be controlled emotionally, because that's what we have done and it hasn't worked. Exactly. It's created individuals like ourselves that say, we want better for our kids. We won't do that to them. Yeah, it worked for us, but what worked for us may not be appropriate for our kids. Yeah. Because it worked for us because there was no venue for those types of expression, unless we were just in a group of kids and we did get those experiences. And nowadays we don't have our kids in big groups, little pedal bike gangs in every block, going around and learning the dangers of reality and protecting themselves and safety, and depending on what they can provide for themselves. Every kid has gone out and picked berries and sharpened a stick and pretended to scavenge for themselves and make believe. And when our children are in a society where everything is earmuffs and climb under your desk, every time we say so, get your adrenals going, everyone, because there's a training exercise. Those kids are traumatized all day long from that. I feel it in them as an empath and what's going through their body and in the fear state, and the fear state is the most convenient state to program someone in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So that's why it does work with obedience training for dogs that have breeds that are very stubborn and very alpha based. And if you have a dog like that, you understand that dog has to fear you. If it does not fear you, it will look to protect you, and it will bite people.
Yeah.
And it will act aggressively when you're not around. And that's something that you have to address when you accidentally get a dog that has a temperament in it, that has that animal instinct of that hasn't been fully domesticated, or that has the ability to hurt someone. So yeah, you understand that the dog has to respect your strength, your ability to subdue it. And you don't want to do it by hitting it, because it just fears you.
Right.
It's your ability to exert control while in control. And that is through, yes, saying no and making sure they understand it and not letting them get away with it. But is that appropriate for a human being that has an intelligence and a self-awareness that isn't the same frequency as an animal? It has something special, and we will talk about how special I believe humans are later on, and why we think and why we create the world around us, why we make so many mistakes. We have the ability to create. And that's what's truly valued in our children, is their ability to create. Number one, as parents, that we've discovered is what they believe, what they're trying to accomplish is valid. Doesn't matter that they're 3, doesn't matter that they're 8 or 10. What their voice is expressing is as strong of feelings as they can have. It doesn't get more important to those individuals. Every moment is the most important moment in their life. And then the next one becomes even more important. So how do we say, no, you don't get importance until you're 13? No, you don't get it until I tell you. No, you don't get it here, you get it there. Because that's what we're telling our kids. You're not important.
Yeah.
Your voice isn't important, and no one wants to hear it. And how many people believe in themselves after hearing those words?
Mm.
And now your sense of identity is threatened. And now you need safety and security. So you seek safety and security, and who can provide it to you? Well, not my mom, not my dad, because they both burned me. So did everyone else. So who? Well, there's a little voice inside called ego, and it steps up to bat.
Yeah.
It doesn't care how many strikes it's got. It's not leaving the plate until you go and educate it that, hey, the lights are off, stadium's closed.
Yeah.
Everyone's gone home. It's only you, dude.
Yeah.
Only you.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, I mean, think about how disheartening it is to hear, if you're in a work setting, you're in a meeting and you voice an idea and it's no, we don't want to hear about that. That's that, as an adult, what does that do to you? Take it to 1,000 times greater to a child who's learning, who's just learning. Do I want to hear about, the Wuzzles and Lightning McQueen 3,000 times a day? Absolutely not. No one's saying this is easy, but you feign interest. Why do you feign interest? Because you love them and it's important to them, and it's letting them know, whether this is a conscious thought in your head or not, subconsciously, you're letting them know that yes, your reality, your whole universe, which are these silly cartoons and cars right now, it matters. Therefore, you matter. You matter to me. Somewhere along the way, as a society, we traded the emotional intelligence and education of emotional intelligence for pure obedience. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about why and how that has occurred. But what's it going to take for us as parents to say, no, it didn't work for me. The more in my family unit I was meant to conform and be controlled and told no and do it my way, the worse it got, because I was going to be damned if I was going to do what I was told, because it didn't feel right, and it didn't matter what I wanted, and it's a ripple effect. These are things that I've been dealing with you and Leia in my mentorships, even now at 40 years old and a mother of 3. There are things that were said to me and modeled to me that I still have to fight. I don't want that for my children. I have a thing about abundance and financial wealth. Why? Because money was my mother's god. And I was going to be damned if I was going to be controlled in that fashion. And I signed up for some really interesting lessons regarding that. We have to be so aware, and we're not always, and it's not every moment of every day. I mean, I still lose my cool and raise my voice, and but it's what you do in that split second, and then what you do afterwards. Let them know that, yes, mommy yelled, maybe wasn't the best choice in the moment, but mommy still loves you, and it's okay. It's okay if you can't control your voice and you yell. And we'll talk about how we, try and make better choices. Maybe you could have yelled into a pillow. Maybe you could go do whatever it is, right? Whatever's, feels right for your family, for your kids. But we have to let them. We have to let them. It's not an option if we want healthy, functional adults, as the end result of our children. We're not raising Rottweilers. We're, and I even hate the term raising. I'm not raising rabbits. I'm not raising children. I am here as their emotional, spiritual guide. I am a tour guide. I am going to come up with an itinerary. I'm going to have different options for you to choose from. I'm going to point out that maybe trying to feed the alligators from your hand is not the best plan. You're going to want that hand as time goes on. But, I think that nomenclature, the facilitators, is perfect. We need to start facilitating experiences, and however they turn out. So maybe you have to leave the apple orchard because somebody's pants are missing and the other one's screaming, and somebody's hungry. The orchard isn't going anywhere, and you don't have to feel stressed or embarrassed by what people are thinking or looking at you, because it doesn't matter. What matters is that your kids saw that, okay, we're pivoting, we're going back to the car, we'll get you all sorted, whatever it is, right? But we let them. We don't berate them in the car the whole 40-minute ride home, telling them how awful their behavior was.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and we aren't perfect. I have learned more from my children on the spiritual journey than I did in 18 years of applying myself. It was, well, I guess it wasn't quite that much until I had the kiddos, but yeah, it took a while to really figure out self-love.
Yeah.
And I see the value in it after I had children. I knew it was the answer to my illness. But when I had the children, I truly understood what self-love was, because there was parts in my children that reflected aspects within me that I felt I couldn't love. And to want to change my child so they didn't have that aspect, or to prevent them from having it somehow, protect them from the version of me I didn't like in me, I realized, oh my gosh, the only reason they have it in them is because it's a part of what I am, and I have to be okay with that in me. Only when I'm okay with my own inner frustrations can I deal with my child's frustrations.
Yeah.
And be there for my child. So my children have taught me about frustration, about anger, and permission to accept oneself, even though you're not feeling good. And that has helped me be there for my children, even when they're not feeling good, especially then.
Yeah.
And as a father, not needing to fix it, not being angry that it happened, or that I didn't stop it from happening, or that they didn't see what they were doing and stop what they were doing before it happened. Because I was attaching to a lot of those ideas as a parent, believing that I was going to do the best job ever. And yes, because I feared failure so much. I believe the most important thing in my life is raising my children. I don't say I have a career. I do whatever I please, and I like to do a lot of things. And
Yeah.
when you apply yourself with an open heart and don't exist in boundaries, it's easy to be accepted by others. They see the quality and the honesty in what you're doing and who you are, and they can depend upon that. So every individual gets to have these experiences should they choose, or they can try and just keep telling themselves, oh, it's almost time for them to go back to school. Like, oh no, it's summer.
Mm.
And we're thinking, oh my gosh, we're so excited that our kids are wrapping up and they're finishing off. They're almost done. And my wife and I couldn't be more ecstatic, because we get our kids all day long now.
Yep.
And they're amazing beings, who they are and the way they look at life. And we only get them for so long.
Yeah.
Robin's going to get a lot of time to look at the world through the eyes of a 60-year-old and a 50-year-old.
Mm.
But right now, I have the opportunity to look at the eyes through 8-year-old twins and hear their friendship and their relationship, and then see their 10-year-old sister participate as an 8-year-old with them, and then them joining her on her level. They're seeing the value in all kinds of relationships. And I think they're getting more value than they've ever gotten now that we have them in our home, rather than going to school 5 days a week for approximately 14 hours worth of curriculum.
Mm.
So, and that, if you're homeschooling, can be done in a lot less.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not that much. So you can knock homeschooling off in 2 to 3 days if you wanted. Our schedule is 4 days, and it's half a day for 4 days. Of course, we have to help them get their projects done. They do that, and they do that on their time too. But it gets done, and we can take a break and go for a pedal bike ride.
Mm.
When one of them isn't feeling it, they can go and lay down. And they have formed bonds with these other kids on Zoom. We've made the best of technology. It's not the cause of the pandemic. It's allowing us to still have connections. So right and wrong are very subjective. And we as the individual, as a parent, have to gauge what is right for my child now. Because it may have been wrong for them 2 weeks ago. But now they may be ready for that accountability. And they may have to go to the room and sit there and think about it. Whereas before it was just, don't do that. But now that it's clear they have an awareness of what they're doing and they chose to do it, now it is time to understand, okay, a punishment is in order. You earned this. Here we go. And that's how I communicate to my kids. Hey guys, you earned this. It's not a punishment. It's what you earned. We told you your behavior was going to result in this. So you continued, and that's what you got. So they're mad when discipline, but they're not mad at us. They're mad that they're being held accountable.
Yeah.
And then they get over that. If they're mad at us for disciplining them, then they don't get over that.
Yeah.
Unless we apologize, but then they think we did something wrong if we're apologizing.
Mm-hmm. Sets
So
up a vicious
even,
cycle.
yeah, so it's a delicate thing, our children and their psyches and how we grow them. So becoming self-aware is very, very recommended. I've watched Kelsey change her life. This beautiful woman before me now. And I'm so pleased to be doing this interview with you today, or this show together, and that will continue in hopes that you, the audience, gain an appreciation for the efforts you've been putting in, and know it's being recognized in your children where it's most important. The world doesn't have to see it. It's yours, your relationship with your kids and with your spouse. Whether you're together or not, you have a duty to be that version of God in their life. And what will they seek in their outer world? A version opposite of who we are, or something that has the moral boundaries and tendencies that they have grown with and they're comfortable within themselves because they've explored all versions of self.
Yeah.
So what they're looking for on the outside, well, they don't look on the outside, they know it's inside. So when they recognize something on the outside, they take the opportunity. And that's where we can encourage our kids to guide themselves in life, is recognize everything as an opportunity. It may result in this circumstance or this circumstance. And how can you take it upon yourself to predict what your actions will result in? That's true intelligence.
Yes. Yes.
So,
I mean, they are our immortality. They, our lineage, our, our progeny, that is true immortality. Their ability to be, their ability to be exactly who they are, emotional intelligence intact, and able to voice who they are and 100% wholly love themselves. And it does. That is how we change the world, ladies and gentlemen. That is absolutely how we change the world. It's not beating war drums and going out and doing what have yous. It's, we change ourselves and our kids follow suit, and imagine what our grandkids are going to be able to accomplish and to change, and what amazing beings that they're going to be. I mean, it's a bright, endless future. And I, for one, am so grateful for this journey and for all of your wisdom and this beautiful series that we're going to be doing, and all the work that you're doing at Spirited Rebirth and Herbal Healing. Really, folks, you should check out their website. It's galacticinnature.com. All types of different services for wherever you are, from just questioning to really being ready to dive in. It is, I don't have the words, it really, it saved my marriage. It has made me a better parent, and it's made me a better friend to myself. I have a better understanding of myself now than I ever even dared to think possible. And we really can't wait to share it all with you on this series, all the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and everything in between. And just a huge heartfelt thank you, Robin. This was an incredible conversation, and I'm really looking forward to more to come.
I'm very honored, Kelsey. It's my pleasure. Yes, thank you so much. And if you want to see more of me, I do have a YouTube channel, Robin Nordling, and we will put it in the show notes for you guys. I've got some other videos, in-depth dives into consciousness and why we think the way we do, and what we can do about that. and practical applications. So yes, Kelsey is a marvelous example of what an individual can create when anyone takes that path inward to say, I matter and I'm here for me and I've got to figure this out. There's no escaping it. There's no hoping for a better tomorrow. There's creating a better now. And there is no time but the now. And the gift for your future self is action. And when you act so much, you get a tendency to start gifting your future self. And that's my interaction, my relationship with self. It has evolved from healing my past versions that held guilt, trauma, pain. We'll get into some of that fun stuff and the complexities of what's available to us when we open up our emotional body and why it is so scary to some individuals. Yeah. And what true power is. And with those things integrated, your story doesn't end. You in the moment find so much grace and beauty in what's going around. You say, how do I accommodate more love? Well, I know of this Robin that's going to exist tomorrow morning. So for him, I can get these dishes done now. I can hydrate my body and get the right nutrients in. So Robin tomorrow has everything he needs to be successful in his day. That's my day-to-day life. And I've got the most amazing family I could have prayed for. And Kelsey, I know you can say the same. We are eternally blessed, and we've worked really hard to come to this point of observation of ourselves and our journeys. And with it, it's allowed us to ground out our own pain, to forgive that guilt, that shame. We see the purpose, the role it played. And we've forgiven those versions of self that played those roles and welcome them into our heart. And because of that, every version of our children matters. And we look to share more of our knowledge and what we're discovering through being parents and of remembering being children and aspiring to be grandparents. So yes, our children's children, yes, what an honor it will be to babysit them. Yes. It will be difficult to send them home, but I'm sure we'll be so exhausted that it will be a relief.
Yes.
And I look forward to those moments.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Kelsey.
Thank you. Thank you. No, this has been wonderful. And thank you everyone for watching. And like Robin mentioned, check out those show notes, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great evening. Take care.